a late addition, and I'm delighted she said yes. I had a meeting with Samantha yesterday, or Deborah, and said, would you please? And she said yes. But Deborah's got another meeting to go to. So I will say hi to everybody again. Welcome to the newbies that have not been here before. And I'm going to hand over to Deborah Hay now, who works for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation in Scotland, and she's a policy and partnership manager. So over to you, Deborah. I don't know if you've got a presentation or you just want to talk.
Well, I'm afraid I didn't bring a presentation. I now feel slightly underprepared.
Oh, no, no, I only asked you yesterday, so no, not a problem. So if you just want to launch up, is it okay to take questions at the end?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
So I don't need to leave until 25 past.
Okay, that's great. If people can put questions in the chat then while you're going along as well. So launch, Deborah. Hello, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for letting me gatecrash your meeting today. It's very kind of you, and it's very, very timely. So as Leslie's just said, my name's Deborah Hay. I work for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is a UK organisation dedicated to solving poverty. Wants to see a UK without any poverty. And we have a very small team here up in Scotland. I'm based in Glasgow. Not that I've been anywhere near the office for over a year, but you get the general idea. So there's four of us. There's a deputy director for Scotland. There's myself. There's a guy called Jack Evans who leads on a different policy area, and Carla, who is a senior analyst. So a very small team in Scotland. And JRF, I guess, is interested in the housing space for the reason that we think you can solve poverty, basically, if you take different choices in four key fields. So if work is a better route out of poverty for people and pulls its weight, if the social security system is set up in a way that makes sure that people escape poverty and can get out of it and can offer adequate support while people need it. Housing, because it's often a big chunk of a household's expenditure, not just the rent, but also the sort of wider running costs. And the fourth chunk is people need to believe that you can solve poverty and want to take that action. So we call that our sort of public will strand. So there's sort of four key areas JRF wants to see action in: employment, social security, housing, and the public will to put the right policies in place. So in theory, I lead our work around housing in Scotland. Although the Scotland team's work doesn't sort of divide quite that neatly. But what I was talking to Leslie about yesterday, and why she suggested that I come along, is that I sort of looked over the last year or so at all of the things that have happened, and we all know, if we didn't know before, we certainly do, and you guys will all know it all too well, that housing has become a really sort of important sort of touch point around the pandemic. Home is really important, and tenant views are really important. And it struck me that while a lot of emergency responses were very good, they tended to be dominated not so much by tenants, but by landlords and developers. And up at the national sphere, I wondered whether it was important to get a sort of stronger national tenant voice up there. So I know that this organisation and others do some of that tenant participation work, but I wondered whether lots of the other organisations really had a sort of strong enough tenant voice. So alongside that, I joined Joseph Rowntree about sort of 2 years or so ago, and when I joined, they sort of impressed upon me that they were taking very seriously this idea that nothing about us without us is for us. So everything that JRF does, every piece of work or program or project that it develops, needs to be grounded in the lived experiences of people that we are trying to support, whose prospects we're trying to change. And so I want JRF to work much more closely with tenants if I can. And the reason that's, I guess, important in the poverty space is about 2/3 of people in Scotland who live in poverty are people who rent their homes. So they're a really important part of that story. So I'm looking to do two things. I'm looking to share a sort of couple of specific initiatives that JRF is doing that I'd like your ideas about whether it's something you would be interested in working with us on. And secondly, I'd really value your views about how best to build sort of tenant participation into the work that we do. So you might have sort of views about the right ways to engage people more creatively, or what makes it worthwhile for them, or things that work for you in your daily life. So two key things. Every year we produce an annual report in Scotland, which basically is our kind of state of the nation, what's happening to poverty levels for different kinds of households, different kinds of groups every year. And we work with a small group of people. We worked with an advisory group last year, which just had a small number of people. So one way to get involved would be to help us with that work. And what that involves is helping us shape the kind of questions that it's important that report looks at, and helps us think through what some of the solutions to the problems that the report identifies, what some of the solutions might look like as well. So that's one sort of very specific project that you tenants and or others might be interested in helping shape. And the second is a sort of a more broad one, which is overlaps with that question about the how, which is to ask you whether you think, or what you think maybe the pros and cons are, of JRF taking an approach where it develops a sort of tenant panel in the same way that the housing regulator has got, or that other organisations have got, and whether that's the right way to build sort of tenant participation work and perspective into the work that we do, or whether it would be better for JRF to just work alongside a sort of broader group of people and make sure that tenants are properly represented on there. And part of the reason I ask that question is because having spoken to some other colleagues across the sector, I've sort of been given the view that tenants tend not to define themselves by their tenure. So if you want people to engage with the work that you do, then you have to find something that's, thematically interesting for them. It's not that people wander around with I'm a private rented sector or I'm a social rented sector tenant on their head. And then finally, while I'm busy sort of picking your brains, I would be interested to know whether you think, when we are looking at housing, there is value in bringing social renter tenants together with tenants from the private rented sector and potentially low-income householders who own their own home, whether there is value in bringing those different perspectives together, or whether you think it would be simpler, more effective, better to just have people who rent. I'm aware I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to stop there and hope that at least some of that made some sense. Does anyone have any specific questions or queries or anything that didn't make any sense? I can see that somebody has got their hand up. Let me just drop down that list.
It's me.
Alan Christie. Alan. Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, it was really just on the note of panels, because panels definitely have their place. However, I do think we probably overemphasise, or that to me you would have to question how representative any panel is of their tenant population. And I think it's looking at panels alongside other sources of information. So they definitely have their place. There's definitely value in them. But I think you need to be careful about the size of your panel and what the representation is.
Okay, thanks. I think we've got a question here as well on a living rent campaign. Does it cover both sectors? I'm certainly not an expert on living rent campaign, and I think there's living rent campaign in Edinburgh, which is different from the living rent campaign in Glasgow. I think it does cover both sectors, but it's a different kind of organisation. I don't know if anyone's got any more information. I know they're a campaigning organisation, as opposed to maybe a support one. I don't know.
Yes,
does anyone else want to come in?
So they market themselves as a union, a tenant union, and they try to recruit people on the basis that you become a member of that union, and therefore you have access to sort of legal advice, and they call them defender rights people, so sort of community development workers that will help you resolve any specific issues that you've got. And yes, they have taken action or taken an interest in both social and private rented. They predominantly started in the private rented sector, but they have started to recruit social tenants as well, because they're a tenants union.
Any other? Sorry, who was Deborah? Sorry, did I interrupt you there?
No, I was just going to say, I absolutely. I was just going to respond to Alan's thing. The panel idea is not intended to be representative of all tenants, because, as you say, we couldn't get something that was big enough that did that justice. And it's probably worth saying that we have a number of other sort of thematic and area-based groups that we engage with to try and sort of round out that depth of expertise. So, for example, we work with One Parent Family Scotland and Fife Gingerbread because we really want to understand the sort of lone parent experience. We work with Glasgow Disability Allowance because we really want to understand the perspective of people who have disabilities or care for people who do. So you're absolutely right. It needs to be part of a broader picture. But I'm really interested in whether you think Yawn, another panel, actually there are lots of those and there's a better way of doing this, or whether you think actually people might be interested. There are a million tenants, aren't there? So there might be plenty of opportunities for people who are interested in JRF's work to get involved in that panel as opposed to other ones. So very interested to hear your view.
Well, it's not usually a quiet audience. No,
yeah, I think you're right. And that's all right. I think you're right in terms of it depends on the theme. And I guess it's probably useful to find out what other panels are discussing with tenants, so the housing regulator one, the private sector housing panel and stuff like that, rather than duplicate work. It might be worthwhile just checking both.
So I noted that in a news feed I got today that the housing minister apparently yesterday announced that there would be a new rented sector strategy coming out in the Housing 2040 strategy, which I believe is due to be published next week. And in that they talked about trying to bring together a national panel. So there's obviously a lot of interest in this sort of area and making sure that tenant voices are heard loudly enough. So I think you're right. I think we'd have to do a wee bit of mapping and making sure that we're not sort of, and also over asking some of the same people over and over again.
I think as well, just one final comment from me is that I mean, certainly I can only talk for our experience locally, and that there's not a huge interest in joining a panel. People want to give their view, but they don't necessarily want to join a panel. So, I think someone's commented in the chat that, you know, the usual thing about there needs to be a variety of options that feed in.
Yeah, if I can think, I mean, Grampian Housing Association have had a tenants panel called Count Me In, running for years and years. It's a virtual panel, although we probably wouldn't have called it a virtual panel when it started. They'd never meet, and people are invited to take part in occasional surveys. So there's probably, I think you're right. I mean, people only get involved in something that they're particularly interested in. So if you could collect a pool of people or pull people in from the experience, the knowledge and the contacts that people in this room have got, then that might be a way of trying to engage with people. I just wonder, Deborah, if I could ask on your behalf, if anyone in this room would be interested, when you were talking about getting people to come in and join the group that are working on the annual report and looking at the kind of themes and work that JRF does, would anyone in the room here think that you know of anyone who'd be interested? Would anyone in this room be interested? No, sorry. Sorry, Deborah.
I do like an honest reaction. That's great.
So Jane's got her hand up. Jane Mack.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think, you know, that is probably the kind of thing that if you specifically advertise that, then you would get tenants that would maybe be interested in that specific thing, because obviously poverty it's a key area that I'm sure you'd get somebody that would be interested. if you were packaging it just about being involved, an opportunity to have your say on that specific issue, Joseph Rowntree Foundation is quite a well-known organisation that I think that would attract people as well.
Yeah, I think Diana's got her hand up. Thanks, Jane. Diana?
Hi, we're currently looking at doing a project on why tenancies are failing, why people are abandoning their tenancies. So we're doing a lot of research into that as to how what we can do to make things better. And obviously, as Jim was saying, poverty is one of the biggest things at the moment. With COVID, with changes in people's circumstances, the cost of living is still increasing, but we're still asking for rent. We're still chasing rent arrears. As a local authority, they're under pressure, to make up rent arrears. But for us, we're going back and trying to find out why tenancies are failing. Is it to do with the financial aspect? Is it to do with the support aspect? Things like that as well. But I think obviously this has just started, so I don't know what the research is going to be just yet. But poverty will have an implication, I'm sure, in there somewhere. As well as obviously everything that's been happening at the moment. So a lot of people, as Jim said, I've heard of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, so it is a case of marketing it in such a way that people will get involved.
Thanks. I think Colin White. Colin, you've got your hand up. And then
Hi. Hi. Yeah. In Fife, we're a relatively new team, as Leslie knows, and we tried a whole vast of different approaches to get tenants and residents involved in what the council was doing in the local community and in the wider community in Fife, because Fife's quite a mix of rural, semi-rural, and then obviously we've got our big towns. And we generally found that getting involved, like you said, like Fife Gingerbread, a lot of guys like that, even the registered social landlords as well. And when we discovered, obviously, the best thing to do was actually just rock up in the community, stick a gazebo up with a few freebies, and just say to guys, what do you want? What's working for you? What really hacks you off? And how can we do better? And at that point, the ears went up, and people started obviously just we opened the floodgates. Obviously, starting the groups was the easy part because people were interested, but the hardest thing is keeping a group going, because as you solve a problem, some people tail off. That's their axe grind, and they move on. But we've found we've got a people's panel that we have as well, which has got a couple hundred people in it, and it's a whole mix of background. But then we've got a scrutiny panel, which is only for our tenants, and they prioritise bits and pieces of the council's work that they want to focus on. And on top of that, we've built up our tenants and residents groups. I think we're about 42 or 43 just now for the whole of Fife. We've got a fair bit of work to go on that. And year on year, you've still to keep them. So basically, it's fingers and pies. It's trying everything. And if it fails once, we give it a go again the next year, and we see if we can do it a bit different. And I don't think there is one answer to tenant participation. I think it's lots of different answers, because not everybody, one approach doesn't suit everybody. Virtual works for a lot of them. We're in the process of bringing in a text local survey as well, so we can hopefully try and get our magical 16 to 35-year-olds and see if we can get a tenants list adapted for that. That's our next plan for the next couple of years, is to get that on the go as well. But yeah, 1 year it works, 1 year it doesn't. It's just you keep going round again. So just keep that going.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Colin. And Lisa, you'd probably be the last comment before Deborah has to go.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just wondering, Leslie, if it's something that maybe the regional networks group could link in with, if they might want to get involved.
Yep. I think I mentioned. Yeah, Deborah and I had a chat about them yesterday, but I think the regional networks are good, but I think they've gone from 9 regional networks down to 4. Mm-hmm. So that kind of have to tell you a wee story as well. But I think I can't help agreeing with the kind of body of the room that it's about themes and getting people involved in something that they're interested in. Deborah, has that been useful for you? It's kind of short and sweet, but you've got a good range of contacts here now. Okay, Deborah's put up her email. Thanks, Deborah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful for that. It's all very common sense, very much what I needed to hear. And I'm wondering whether, if it's not too cheeky, I could follow up with a couple of you and actually sort of explore some of that stuff. So one thing might be to just see if we can recruit a small number from maybe active tenants that are active in your area, because they can bring that capacity and that confidence and expertise. And or maybe another thing would be to run a session and ask if people would like to come as our sort of annual report or other sort of briefings or sort of investigations about housing or other matters are underway. Perhaps we could invite people to come along to that and take part in that. So let me have a wee think about all of the things that you've said. And actually, Colin, really pleased to hear you're sort of experimenting with tech solutions. We're very much aware that actually a sort of key constituent are younger and working age residents, particularly actually people who are working. They are the people that actually sometimes we're most worried about, but they're most difficult to engage in our sort of general work. So that's definitely something to think about, being a bit more creative in terms of reaching that. But yes, that's all very helpful. Lots of things for me to think about. And I'll let you guys chat amongst yourselves, and I'll touch base with Leslie. And if it is appropriate, I might reach out to one or two of you. And if it isn't, then that's absolutely fine. And thank you very much for your help.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for coming along. Maybe see you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
Bye.
I think it'd be a good idea if you don't want to be contacted with it by Deborah, can you let Elaine know? Okay, so moving on, I have a very short Scottish Government roundup from the Tenant Priorities team. So 3 out of the 4 regional network AGM dates are confirmed, and I can send this to you if that's important. Saturday the 8th of May is South East Scotland, Saturday the 15th of May is North of Scotland, Saturday the 22nd of May is Central Scotland, and Region 3, which is South West Scotland, which I know covers Dumfries and Galloway, Ayr, the Ayrshires, that date has yet to be decided. They're all at 11 o'clock in the morning and they're all virtual, and these things are very sort of strictly ruled, if you like. So invitation letters and paperwork will be issued to RTOs and groups and to TP workers. So I'm glad, after many years of asking, that TP workers are going to be on that invitation list. And the government are asking if TP workers can stay in contact with groups to spread the words about the AGMs this year, if you can. In terms of nominations, just in case anyone gets any questions from anyone of people that are keen to stand for nomination to the RTOs, there'll be no requirement for people to meet up with for their RTO or group members to secure endorsements. The paperwork will be sent out, and digital signatures, etc., will be scanned, and endorsements will be accepted through email. So that's for people who want to become part of the regional networks. There are vacancies across Scotland, so there's no one from North Ayrshire, no one from Dumfries and Galloway, 2 spaces available for representatives from each of those areas, and 2 spaces in Inverclyde. So if anyone wants any more information, you want to fire any questions across to the Scottish Government or ask me anything just now, which I probably won't be able to answer, then it's Carolyn Watson. But if anyone's got any more information, the one thing I would add is that we, as you probably know, got a grant from the Scottish Government, and we this year are going to be working with a small group from the regional networks. So I'll be reaching out to people, and we're going to be looking at rent setting and tenant involvement. So it's got a couple of strands. We've had the first meeting. It's very early days yet. So the first kind of strand, again, this has not been rounded out properly. The first kind of strand is going to look at what tools, if any, landlords use to determine rent levels. So do they use a rent affordability tool? Do they use the business plan? Do they use the SHIP? And the next, moving on from that, is at what point in rent consultation do tenants take part? Are they involved at those early stages when we're matching the business plan or the SHIP to the proposed rent rise, or are they involved when it becomes a consultation exercise? So we're also looking at the best methods, or some of the methods that are being used to consult tenants, and we want to do an investigation into which methods works best. It is an absolutely enormous subject, and we'll want to try and pin it down, because if it takes too long, by the time we get the work done, things will have changed again. So we're really keen to get that work done as soon as possible. And that's all really I can say about it just now, because we haven't really rounded it out particularly. So we've only had the first meeting. Does anyone want to ask me anything about that? No, that's good, because I'm not sure I'd be able to reply to that either. So I'm going to join together the next couple of items on the agenda, because it's a really quite a big agenda, and I'm not quite sure why that happened. Many of you have shared really good practice that you've been doing, and Colin has just done that as well over the past year, and it is almost a year. We've talked about, I know there's quizzes, there's training going on, there's working groups, and we've tried to maintain, with maybe a bit of a stumble at the start, keeping tenants together, keeping ourselves together, and keeping tenants engaged. And I have some of our members' queries that people were saying, who's doing what, is people having groups together, what are folk doing? So hopefully you found those really useful. But we've got a couple of questions that have come from members who were coming along today. And the first one is about sharing good practice and innovation for continued contact with extended restrictions in place, especially for those who are not digitally enabled. I think that was your question, Jenny. Jennifer, was that your question? I think Jennifer's just disappeared. Anyway, so what we're looking for is people willing to share what they're doing just now. If you've done anything different from the start of COVID, and particularly with those that are not digitally enabled. I know Carol Hannaford's here, and Carol, you've been encouraging people to dial in. You there, Carol?
Yeah, sorry, I was switched off. Yeah, we've got tenants, a couple of tenants who are completely dinosaurs. And so what we've been doing is phoning them into meetings, and we've done a couple of training sessions actually with TPAS. So we had the actual presentation printed off and delivered to them, and so that they can follow the training and just listen as well. So it's actually been really successful. And great news is that one of the tenants who refused to, use her laptop has actually got enough confidence now to try it and has changed. So I think it's all about confidence as much as refusing to do it. Yeah. So it has been quite successful.
Good, thanks, Carol. Has anyone got any other ideas about with extended restrictions? It's been going on for a long time now. Has anyone tried anything new or made any changes to the things you do? Jennifer? And Tracy. Jennifer, do you want to come in? You maybe need to unmute, Jennifer. Hello.
Hello.
Yay! We can hear you.
Can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
Can you? All right, great.
Yes.
Hi. My problem I was asking about was if people use incentives to encourage people to get involved in consultations, and it is linked to all these restrictions that we're working under just now. I am about 40 miles from where I work, and so it's all either on the phone or online. And I'm not getting a good response from people at all. So I just wondered what people are doing out there that I can try to encourage folk to speak to me.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Alan, I think if Alan's this in response, I know Tracy's got another question. So Alan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just I don't feel disheartened by that, Jennifer. I think certainly experience in Falkirk is pretty similar. That we have done a couple of surveys throughout the lockdown period with people who are regularly involved with us to ask them about their preferred methods for keeping in touch, and if they have access to equipment, and what methods do they use. Is it Teams, Zoom, WebEx, whatever? And on both occasions, they've clearly told us that they don't want to engage digitally. We are doing a wee bit of work to try and incentivise them in that we have a wee project fund that they can apply for funding to buy laptops if they're an RTO. And we've also, Donna Chisholm, who's my community engagement officer, who's on just now as well, she's been pointing people in the right direction about how they can access funds for laptops and stuff. But I think the biggest barrier is the confidence thing. And because we're at a stage where the only way we can train people is by training them online, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, really. But having said that, they did tell us that the preferred methods was through email. And so therefore, we send regular emails or send hard copies to stuff. There are one or two who are beginning to come forward now. We had a meeting yesterday with the editorial panel, and with a wee bit of coaxing and persuasion and a wee bit of support, they've begun to engage with us online. But it's been a long process. And in terms of incentives, we do, for things like our rent increase consultation, we do, for every survey return, we offer £1 to be donated to like a food bank or a hospice or something like that that's local. And that, I'm not sure that it has a huge impact, but it certainly helps, and it's a good PR exercise as well, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Jennifer, did you want to come back in there?
Yes, I did. I think partly I just wanted to kind of say that how all this relates to poverty in the community in the last discussion, because we have done a small survey with our BME residents group in Govanhill, and a lot of what the women were saying was we don't have access to equipment, and never mind us having access to it, it's like our kids don't have access to it for their schooling. So I think just the cost of being online, of getting broadband, of having the tech, are huge barriers for people. And then language issues as well. Certainly where I'm working, so kind of poverty and language are big barriers. But I like that idea of offering to make a donation to a local cause. I think we'll try that one. That might be a good idea. But yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in with to respond to Jennifer's question? I know that we've seen some organisations that have sent out an afternoon tea to encourage people to come along, and where it's small community based, they've had someone go to Tesco's. So rather than getting a local company to do it, they've got a housing officer to go to Tesco's and they're gone. Shove it through the lid. But there are those kind of things just to try and entice and encourage people to go along. So Karen, is this in response to Jennifer? Karen.
Hiya, sorry, I just had to unmute there. I've been working quite well, a lot of my resident groups just now, and we found that most of the communities are doing either food parcels and getting involved with supermarkets and things like that. And they're also doing a lot of community garden growing. So I've been going along to a lot of these places, socially distancing, of course, and putting my card and leaflet with my name in it. And I've been getting quite a lot of people wanting to set up their own sort of getting involved. So if you get them hooked and interested first, then you can try and talk them into coming onto these engagement events. So I'm doing the green fingers thing just now. Everybody seems to be interested in the outdoors. So I find that if you get involved with other local groups and get your name about, then you do end up getting a few more people and tenants and groups want to start up and get involved. So
thanks, Karen.
That's just what I'm doing.
Thank you. I see Tracy's got her hand up. Tracy, is this in response to this question? Tracy Knowles? Hello, Tracy.
Hi, sorry.
Hiya.
It was in response to what people are doing kind of other than digitally and around that.
Yep.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we, the housing team, undertook a massive amount of welfare calls, like thousands of calls to tenants who we could identify maybe over a certain age, maybe single parent households, single tenants who were just on their own. So loads and loads of welfare calls so that we could kind of try and tease out if anybody was experiencing any particular difficulties. We also contacted anyone that we didn't have an email for, as they might be digitally excluded. During this time, I managed to get around £100,000 of funding through various streams, and we bought laptops to develop a lending library that we can loan kit to tenants who are interested in becoming involved or have a significant need and can't get from somewhere else. We've had 2 rounds from Connecting Scotland for families where they get a laptop and 2 years of free Wi-Fi in the house. Our sheltered housing team also managed to get 2 lots of Connecting Scotland funding. So they got 242 kits in all, and we got 160 kits in all. So we've managed to help about overall we've managed to help about 500 people get online. Not everybody wants to be online though. So we've moved our newsletter to MailChimp services, and although that is an email service, instead of we're having kind of issues with other work streams. So for example, Xerox Creative Services and the impact the pandemic's had on them and us giving work to them. We can print these newsletters for anybody who wants them printed, and our intention is to print them and get them through the door of every sheltered housing tenant because they've been particularly affected during this time. For the tenants who've been given laptops and things, we are planning to do a video that we can send them on how to use their devices and also what we can do with them. I got funding from a food fund, and we are buying vouchers so that we can use this over a longer period of time, particularly if there's another localized lockdown or something. So I work with people who are a bit isolated. And like you mentioned, an afternoon tea, we're looking at doing a cook with me pack so that we provide the food and the instructions, and they'll have the option of going on a device and cooking along with one of us, or just doing it in their own time and just having a bit of fun about it. One of our sheltered housing activity coordinators is also getting funding for smart TVs in sheltered housing. So ongoing, as we're able to open the communal areas, we could do a mixed bag of people joining online or in person to do activities together, and also hold meetings in a mixed environment in the future. And as Karen was saying, I'm actually meeting someone Friday about community gardens and how we can assist with that through tenant participation and gather some more interest in that local community, because we're really trying to concentrate on such a local level right now.
That's great, Tracy. If anyone wants to go and join Tracy, she's an Aberdeenshire council, because that just sounds amazing, the kind of stuff you're doing there. So does anyone else want to contribute? Hopefully that was useful for you, Jennifer.
Yes, thanks. Yep.
Yeah, good. Does anyone get anything else they want to add on before I move on? Before we go to the general free-for-all? I think I was just going to, some of you were at our members session just earlier on today, where we were talking about the various different things that we can offer in terms of an organisation to support you. And certainly over lockdown, we've been having webinars. We've just introduced our disco chats. No need to wear glitter. Just they're half an hour, really 15 minutes of input and 15 minutes of questions on topics that people are particularly interested in. We had one on affordability, and we had one on working from home, and there's another one coming up quite soon on retrofitting, which I believe we used to, because I don't know what that was, but I believe we used to call it refurbishment or regeneration of houses rather than new build. So there's lots and lots going on, but we're always keen to find out from folk if you can think of anything else that you'd like us to do. But you certainly didn't come into this meeting to listen to me gibbering on as per usual. So listening to folk, has anybody got any good ideas, new things that they've got on, or anything that anybody wants to ask? So this is your opportunity, put your hand up. And the last question that we were asked for this session was, has anyone got any preparations? What are you going to do to come out of lockdown? So these two kind of two things are quite well linked. So anybody get any thoughts, any suggestions? Quite a lot of new people here. So I'd quite like some of the new people that haven't had a word in to get their word in as well. Stop me from talking, because now I'm talking even more. So please, anybody, put your hand up, put it on chat. Any thought? Oh, here we are. Yay, Tracy.
We've been doing a lot of thinking about coming out of lockdown because it cheers us up as a team. And we are really, really keen to do, like what was mentioned earlier, go out to the communities, especially our smaller rural settlements, because Aberdeenshire is massive. And we would like to do this over the whole of the summer period, get a gazebo and some chairs out with some promotional materials and say what's happening in your community, because we want it to come from the bottom up. And we're just really, really keen to do that and get involved with the likes of the community gardens and things like that. So that's what our big plan, as long as it's within our risk assessments as we move forward. But hopefully things will be looking up really soon. So yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Great, thanks, Tracy. Anybody else got any plans? Has anyone actually talked through with their Colin White?
Yeah, I was just going to say that on our first year, I was tasked with getting our gazebo and promo stuff all sorted out, and myself and John Houston worked long and hard on getting a branded gazebo that stood out from the rest. So if Tracy's wanting any wee bits of advice, and even our mock-up designer sketches on the gazebo, it might save her a bit of time when she's ordering, because that took us about 3 months to get sorted out and get through planning and permission and everything, and make sure it had the right spec so we could take it to any official event or even a smaller event, you know. So we can even rock up to the Chartered Institute and plunk it in there because it's fully spec'd with its fire grades and everything else. So if that saves her a bit of time, I'm happy for her to give me an email and I can get stuff to her.
Do you know, Colin, I never thought of health and safety and fire grades or planning permission when planning a pop-up gazebo. I just thought you went and popped up.
No, the first couple of events we went to were actually big. Like one of them was the Cooper Farmers Market, a big, massive annual event, and we were asked in advance to send all our spec on how fire retardant the gazebo is, and up to what grade, and what its dimensions and materials were, so that they knew that we were fully compliant with their insurance.
Wow, who knew? Well, we all do now. Yeah. Thanks for that, Colin. Yeah. Thank
That's
you.
That's why it took 3 months.
Sorry, 3 months. I know, eh? Grant?
Hiya. I was just wondering if, like, we've been using Zoom and stuff to do interviews and meetings and stuff, and I wondered if anyone is going to continue using that after lockdowns ended, if you're going to be asking people what they want or just tell them if they want to come in to the office.
Okay, Grant, where are you from, Grant?
Cathcart, just south of Glasgow.
Okay. Yep. Anybody got any thoughts like that? Ailey?
Hiya. Yeah, we've been using Zoom quite a lot, and I know that our plan is to kind of have a bit of a hybrid approach when we come out of it. So we're in Fife, we're in Fife, Perth and Kinross, Clackmannanshire, so we cover quite a wide geographical area, so we definitely still want to keep using Zoom to kind of help make TP more accessible to people so they don't have to travel miles and miles to come to a meeting. And I think our initial plans that we've thought about, we're quite lucky in that our boardroom's just kind of all been like teched out and stuff, so I think we'll be able to have meetings where people can come in if they'd like to, but they'll still be accessible for anybody that wants to log in online. Because the feedback we've got, we did quite a big survey about the middle of last year, and we got about just over 120 responses, and people were saying that the main way they wanted to keep involved was kind of like online through meetings and stuff. They found that easier. So yeah, we're kind of wanting to do a blended approach and keep using some of the technology that we're using at the moment to keep in contact with people.
Okay, thanks, Ailey. And Evelyn, you coming in?
Yeah, I would just really echo what Ailey's saying about a bit of a hybrid, but I think from listening to our customers, a majority of them are really keen to meet face to face. I think they've had enough of, we use Teams, and I think a lot of ours have had a lot of things going on with Teams, and they're getting maybe almost what I would call Teams fatigue. So I think it's about striking a balance between alternating, doing some meetings face to face and doing some via Teams. But I think it opens up other horizons, because I think for some customers who can't ever come to face-to-face meetings because either they feel insecure travelling alone, or they don't want to travel, or they don't have the time but they want to be participating in part of the agenda, they want to contribute. It gives other opportunities for us to use a mixed method. Even at the face-to-face meetings, we can still bring other customers into those using that method as well.
Okay, thank you. Grant, was that useful?
Yeah, it was. I was just wondering, are people sending out surveys to ask what people want, or are you just continuing to offer these things? Is that something that we should be doing just now, I think? I don't know.
Any comments on that? Is anyone asking their tenants what their preference is, or are you asking them while you're kind of online with them? Tracy, and then someone else.
We're asking while we're online with people, but we have built in a few questions in our tenant satisfaction survey that's going on. So we're hoping to get some insight into the tenant satisfaction survey and work a little bit from there. But from the perspective of a couple of our tenant groups that are meeting virtually, they're quite keen to do a mixed environment in the future.
Okay, thanks. I think, Evelyn, you're going to come in there again as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say we've got a digital group called Anyone at Home, where customers sign up and give us their email address, and they basically agree to having any kind of digital communication with us. So sometimes we use that tenant group for online surveys and things like that, so we can communicate through that group to ask customers if they want to be part of face-to-face or digital meetings going forward. So we would use that as a main vehicle for communication about and asking customers what their views are.
Okay, thanks. Lisa?
Yeah, as Leslie said, we had a membership meeting this morning. There was a lot of tenants here, and I think what came out of that membership meeting was a lot of people were saying they really liked the online webinars and stuff that TPAS has been doing, and a lot of them were saying because of maybe a disability or because they don't drive or because they've got quite a distance to travel, usually having to go to meetings, they were saying that they would prefer like a kind of blended approach when we do get back to some kind of normality. So although a lot of them are keen to go back to face-to-face, a lot of them are seeing the benefit of doing it online as well, and it's enabling them still to join in without all the travelling and whatever. So I think a lot of the feedback coming back from the tenants is they do prefer this because of mobility issues and whatever as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Samantha? Samantha Hoff? You need to unmute, Samantha, if you're still muted. Hi, Samantha, we're not hearing you. Hello? Hello? No, I'll ask Alan to come in, Samantha, and then if you can connect, we'll hear. Maybe put it in the chat, Alan?
Yeah, it was just on the back of what Lisa was saying, though. I mean, that people preferring it for the... Was that people who were already online that were telling us that, though? Do you know what I mean? So people who are already coming along to a webinar or an online Teams meeting that are telling us that they like it this way. You know, so what is the people that aren't, that are the concern? I know we, for example, in our tenant satisfaction survey, the last two, and we're about to do another one next year, we asked people about their preferred methods of engagement. We asked them about all the kind of IT equipment, and it's something like 80% of our tenants have access to doing stuff online. But when we asked them about the preference of doing business online, 71% said no, they didn't want to do stuff online. So, I mean, that may have changed now with the lockdown and stuff, but you know, we just need to be careful about the methods we use. So when we're doing our research, that we're not basing it on what people who are online are telling us.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned earlier about not Jennifer, not just having the tech, but having the confidence. Do you know, when I think over this past year, people who, and I think Carol said the same thing, people who would never have gone online are now going online. And I think, I mean, for me, I think part of the thing is about TP is that TP is about people and about, and it, so if you go into a meeting normally, you would, well, if you were me, you would drive there, you would make yourself a cup of coffee, have a chat to the person sitting next to you, and chat to the person round the corner from you. You would go on with the meeting and then do the same in reverse on the way out. So I think I absolutely agree that for some people this has been something that's given them company. It's helped them stay engaged, and that will be the future for them. It works for them. And I think a lady said today, you know, trying to get trains and buses with a walking stick is really difficult. So for some people, this is the way forward. But I think that what lots of people have been saying is that the blended approach works best for them. Now, Samantha couldn't get on, but I can see her chat there. Asked tenants a preference at the back end of last year, and a lot said they were happy with email and hard copy instead of digital. So we'll need to see what their opinion is when we come out of lockdown. You know, I think people's opinions have changed. We've seen many more people coming online who didn't have the capacity to do that. So yeah, I think it's changing times. So anyone get anything else that they want to add or ask, or a point of information, point of contact, any new exciting things happening? No, we're all exhausted after a year of digital meetings, pretending that we haven't actually exploded with weight as well. Anybody get any comments, any chat, anything you want to share with us? Oh, here we go, Jane. Yay.
Well, I was just wondering, I presume from your Scottish Government update, just being on the regional networks, they didn't, I'd spoken to you about the whole HRA guidance. This kind of issue is only really relevant to local authorities, but kind of relates to the whole poverty and everything else. But it is just, did they just not answer, or was...
No, I sent it to them. And they said they were aware of it. Do you want to share it with the rest of the group?
Yeah, well, so
they couldn't respond for this one, but they said that they would.
Right. Well, this issue has come up in Western Bartonshire Council, and within our rent setting, there was a option. We were going to have an underspend because we haven't been doing as many repairs, just because of all the lockdown restrictions, and our repairs are done by our building services. And because there's been less repairs done, there's been less charges to the housing revenue account, so our building services have made less surplus, which normally goes to the general fund. So there was a proposal that the housing revenue account should still make a payment towards building services, kind of for their lost income. And in our tenants' view, and particularly mine as well, but also the regional networks, well, this goes against the housing revenue account guidance. It's a ring-fenced account, and it shouldn't pay for things that that they haven't received. But so Western Bartonshire tenants have been challenging this, and they have managed. Our rent setting got set last week, and there was an amendment to not use HRA money in this way temporarily. They kind of got a reprieve, but it didn't get resolved. And they just haven't had a satisfactory response from the regulator or from through the regional networks contacted the Scottish Government. And it is just a topic that I would have thought, the regulator, they should be there protecting tenants' rights and tenants' money, and nobody wants to want to put their head above the parapet. Which I just think is really disappointing. It's difficult to get tenants involved anyway, but when they then kind of hit a bit of a brick wall, I think it's been disappointing, but it's also, just about that HRA guidance. It's now mentioned even in the charter, local authorities are meant to comply with it. So you're kind of like, well, what else do they need to do to make people actually do this?
Yeah, it's good point, Jane. I certainly put it to them. And they said that they were aware of it. So I'll need to go back and have a wee read at the email, and I'll see what they're saying more than that. But there's certainly, I don't think they're shying away from it. I just think they don't be taught. I'm not sure they know what to do with it, to be honest. So interesting times. But thanks for bringing that up, Jane. Appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries.
Anyone get anything else they want to share before any points? Anything else? Nope. Oh, Ailey and one other. Okay.
Sorry, I was just on the talk of kind of the road shows and stuff that people have been mentioning. And I don't know if it's new or exciting, but we've been trying to do these online. So we're doing like a weekly virtual roadshow on a Thursday afternoon. And it's designed for those who are both digitally excluded and included. So we have a team, so we have like a rep from housing management, asset management, accounts, go into kind of separate Zoom rooms, and tenants can log on if they've got a query or an issue, and actually just go directly to speak to someone from the team. But what that hasn't been, we've not had too many people signing on in that way, but what's been successful is it also kind of allows those staff to call out. So each week we'll speak to housing management and identify kind of an area to target, and somebody pulls a report, but we can we use that the 2 hours to actually phone out to the tenants in the area and just do like we would do at a roadshow, just ask how they're doing, if they've got any issues. It might be log and repair, it might be putting in like a fund for welfare funding, or literally just having a chat with them. personally found that that's been kind of a really successful way to get people engaged, because you can promote kind of other events that Max and I have been doing as well. But yeah, it's kind of trying to get that roadshow format and put it online. Well, we can't obviously go out to different developments and estates, and that has been quite successful. We've been getting really good feedback.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Ailey. Jane, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to make another point? Yep.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm like Miss Jean Brodie here. Take your hand down. Has anybody got anything else before we finally disappear? No. Well, thanks everybody for coming along. Really appreciate it. Oh, Alan, are you waving or are you? No, you're waving. Misinterpreting the signals. Thanks everybody for coming along. We'll see you at the next one. And if anyone's got any agenda items or any speakers that they'd like to have coming along, please give us a shout before we announce the next meeting. So thanks everybody for your time and for contributing. So thanks, folks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Lots of texts. Can't get out. Ah. Oh, there we are. Cheers, folks.